Hi everyone and welcome back to another tutorial. Today we're gonna make this beautiful castle-like structure and we can add some flowers or water. So let's get right into it. So let's first create these pillars here. So let's open a circle, Shift A circle. Let's go to edit mode and let's extrude it on the Z axis, so E and Z, and make it a bit higher. And fill this upper circle. And let's bevel it, Ctrl B, and scroll up with your mouse wheel a couple of times until you find something that you're happy with. So something like this. And we can also scale this part here, so let's fill it again and Ctrl and B. And just a tiny bit is enough. And we can bring this part a bit up, so something like this. And let's select this face with your face select. And Ctrl and plus to grow the selection a couple of times, and X and faces. And then we can go back to edge select and select this edge here with Alt and click it. And we can extrude it a bit up. And let's extrude it again and scale it up. And another extrusion. You can give it a shape that you like. I think something like this is good. And you can select these edges here and bevel them. And we can also scale it a bit, so S and Shift and Z. And we can again select this edge here and bevel this a bit too. And 2 segments is enough, and just a tiny bit to make it more round. And now we can select this face and just extrude it upwards to maybe around here. Now we can make these petal-like structure here. And also let's extrude it here, so X and delete this face and edge select. Let's select this edge and again extrude it and scale it up. And let's fill it, and we can press I to make an insert to about here, and we can extrude it again, so we have something like this. And as you can see, this upper part is a bit too big, so we can scale it down. So let's select this face with holding Alt and S and Shift and Z to make it smaller on the Y and X axis, so something like this. So what we can do next is select your pillar and Alt and click this ring here and Shift S and cursor to select it, so it's in the middle here. And what we can do next is Shift A and mesh, and let's select a circle, and we only need 12 vertices. Go to edit mode and scale it. We always have to scale it in edit mode because otherwise the scale will be messed up. So always scale it in edit mode and move it in object mode. So let's go to edit mode and scale it a bit down, about here. And then we can just extrude it upwards to maybe around here. And let's select edge select and select one edge by holding Alt. And now we can rip these edges. So let's select one edge and press V, and then we can rip it. And let's do this with all these edges, so let's select them and V to rip them. And once we ripped all these faces, we can select everything and go to 1. And then we can just insert them, so just pressing I and just a little bit, so our gap is not too big. Go to face select and then press Ctrl and I to invert the selection. Then we can press X and faces, and we have to go to X-ray mode by pressing Alt and Z, or you can go up here and then just select these upper edges here and scale them. So we have to scale it a bit up. And now we can extrude them, so E and then S. And we can also move it a bit down. And next we can press our period key on our keyboard. Or you can go up here and select individual origins, so just pressing S. And let's select these edges again and just scaling them until we have something that we like. And now we can also bevel this, so let's select this upper edge and Ctrl B to bevel them. Maybe just a couple of segments, so maybe just 2 is enough. So we have something like this, and we can also move them a bit down And let's go back to 1 and select these edges down here, and we should bevel them also. So you can press Ctrl B and V. And let's just bevel them a tiny bit, something like this is fine. And now we can give it some thickness, so select everything and Alt E to extrude faces along normal. And just push it out a little bit, so we have some thickness going on. And now Ctrl and 2 to add some subdivision. And shade it smooth. And now we have done with this one. And what we can do now is just copy them and move it up and rotate it on the Z-axis. Something like this. Copy it again and move it up and rotate it. Let's also shade it auto smooth, this pillar here. And we can also bevel this one a bit, and it is too big, I think. So we can go to 3 and just select these face by holding Alt and S and Shift and Z to make it a tiny bit smaller. And now we can bevel these edges, so let's bevel them. And just 2 segments is enough. So this looks pretty nice. And then we can do this upper part here. So for that we have to go to edit mode and select this upper face and Shift S cursor to select it. And let's select a cube. S and Z. And change your pivot point again to median point. And you can make it a bit smaller, it doesn't have to be this big. And let's select this face here and scale it a bit down. And we can delete this face by X and face. Let's select these edges here and E and S. And just a couple of extrusions until we have something that we like. And then bring this face a bit up and make a loop cut in the middle. And we can scale it a bit down to something like this and bevel it. So this looks pretty good. And now we can just fill this face again by F. Then we can insert it by pressing I and extrude it upwards a tiny bit, something like this. Let's delete this face here. Edge select this edge and E and S. And again a couple of extrusions until we have something that we like. And shade it auto smooth. And we can join this all together, so let's join it. So your cube and these pedals here and your pillar and Ctrl and J. And let's also make this part down here. So again just a cube, so we can select it and also select this face here and insert it. And Shift S cursor to select it. And let's select the plane so we have more control. And we can select these edges here again. And E, extrude it a couple of times. And delete this face. So E and S. And again. And then just extrude it down and fill this face here. And now we can just copy these two, so just copy them and move them over on the x-axis by holding Ctrl. And we can leave a tiny gap in between. And let's create this bigger part here. So we can go back and let's select these two parts here and go to edit mode, and let's select this edge and this edge by holding Shift and Shift S cursor to select it so it's in between them. And let's select a plane and edit mode and scale it on the x-axis and a bit on the y-axis. Just not too big, just a tiny bit. And let's give it some couple of extrusions again until we find a structure that we like. And don't forget to delete the upper face. So let's make a couple of extrusions again. So E and S again and scale it a bit. And we can scale it a bit inwards. Just creating a couple of steps so it has some different looks and parts and it looks not so boring. And if you can't really see the details, you can go up here and turn on your cavity so you can see it a bit better. And let's select this edge and extrude it up a bit, and then just scale it a bit up, something like this, and then fill it, and that's it for the structure. And if we're happy with the look, we can move on. So let's create these stairs here, and these are pretty easy to make. Let's bring our cursor back to the world origin, so we can Shift S and cursor to world origin, and select a plane. Edit mode again to scale it on the x-axis. And let's move it over a bit. And what we're gonna do now is go to edit mode and select this edge here and extrude it a bit down. And what we can do next is go to our modifiers and select an array modifier. And this is the wrong direction, so it goes the x direction, and that is wrong, so we can make it to 0. And let's make the y to -1 and the z to -1 too. So now we have a step here. And we can scale it up to as long as we want, something like this. And next we can create this object here with this little sphere here. So let's just select a cube and move it to the right position, something around here. And edit mode and S and Z to scale it a bit up. And S and Shift and Z. And what we can do next, select this face here and move it a bit down and delete it. And let's select these edges here, S and Z, make it a bit bigger, and let's select it and move it up. And again, let's scale it a bit inwards. And again, E and Z, and now just E and bring it up, and then just scale down until you have something like this. And let's scale it more and fill it. Now we can make this sphere here. So Shift S and cursor to select it and mesh UV sphere, and let's make it a bit smaller and place it. And shade it smooth. We can make it even a bit bigger. So this should be fine. And next we can select this again, and we can select these faces here by holding Alt and click them and insert them and pressing I double and E, S and Shift and Z. So this should look fine. And next we can make this long object here. So let's go back and select this edge here, Shift S, cursor to select it, and the plane. Let's give it some thickness so we can see it a bit better. So a solidify modifier and make it a bit thicker like this. And we have to match the rotation to the steps, so you can select the steps and select and solidify. And you can give it some thickness. And check even thickness. And let's go to 3 and select this and rotate it according to the steps. And to move it better around, we have to check this move option here. And we can also move it on the normal axis, so this is much better. So let's move it a bit, and we can match it to the square here. Let's make it a bit smaller on the x-axis. And next we can just select this edge here and extrude it down. Let's select this move option again, and then just on the x-axis, something like this. And next just copy it and move it down. And for that we have to go back to the global. And we have to give this one much more thickness, so let's give it much more thickness. And we can move it a bit in and move it a bit up. And we also have to move this object more onto the stairs, so let's move it more on the stairs. And we should also move these ones a bit up so it's not looking so weird. So let's go to X-ray and 3, and let's select these faces here. And we can move it a bit more inwards. And also these pillars here, so let's move them in. And just adjusting here and there until everything fits. And we can move this a bit more up. And we have to move this a bit more up, so let's move it up. And now we can make these small objects here, so let's make them. And we can press Shift and right click to move our cursor. And let's select it to here. And let's select a cube. Edit mode again, and we can scale it a bit and move it upwards. And we can also make it a bit longer. So everything S and Shift and Z. This should be good, and we can select this upper face and Shift and S cursor to select it, and you can select a circle, and let's scale it a bit down. So let's extrude it a bit, fill this face, and also the upper one, fill it. Or let's just select this upper edge and bevel it a bit, and see so it doesn't clip through. And also these edges down here, let's bevel them a bit and shade it smooth. And next we can select this face here and Ctrl plus grow the selection and X and faces, and let's select this edge here and let's extrude it a bit upwards, and E and S again, and let's scale it more. And you can make this one much bigger, so S and Shift and Z. So we have like a round object here, and let's make it a bit higher. And we can make a loop cut in the middle and scale it a bit up. And let's select all of these edges here by holding Alt and Shift and then just bevel them. So we have something like this, and you can select this upper face, and we can go to our proportional editing and just scale it a bit and shade it smooth, and we can also merge by distance to remove the double vertices. And one edge is too much, so we can dissolve it. So let's select one and X and dissolve edges. So now it looks much better, and we can give it some more loop cuts. So let's give it a loop cut and Ctrl B to have a better shape. And next we can join these two together. So let's join them, Ctrl and J. Let's give it an array modifier. So the x-axis should be to 0 and the y to -1. And the z we can just control it however we like. So let's go to 3, and it should also have some space here. So let's make some space by moving the y direction. Something like this is fine. And then just crank the number up. And as you can see, it is not aligned, so we have to move it on the z direction a bit more. So just holding Shift, so we can control it better, and move it a bit down. So maybe something like this should be good. And the sphere is not on the right place, so what we can do is go to Edit mode, select this face and cursor to select it, then select your sphere and Shift S and selection to cursor, and then just move it a bit upwards. And we can also merge them, so Ctrl J. And what we should do first is probably add a material, so we don't have to do it all on these objects later, so it's much easier. So let's go down here and change it to your shader editor, and press N to hide this menu and go to your material preview. And we can select one object and new, so we can just crank the roughness up. And we can also give it some yellowish color or some warm tone. And next we can just add a bump texture, so it looks more like stone material, and the noise, and connect the color to the height. And now you can see it looks more like a stone texture, and we can make the roughness a bit up and the detail. So now it looks much better. And control and click your noise texture and Ctrl T. You need your node wrangler for that, so you just go to Edit and Preferences and search for node wrangler in the add-ons, and connect the object to the vector. And let's make the scale a bit bigger. Something like this should be good, and the bump is too strong. Let's make the distance to 0.05, or maybe a tiny bit more. So this should be good, and we can make it a bit more detailed and make the scale maybe a tiny bit more bigger. And now we can select everything by pressing A, and lastly select your object with your material and Ctrl L and link materials. And now everything has the same material. And next we can move on, so let's go back to solid view and select these objects here, and also this one, and Ctrl and Shift D and G and X and hold your Control, so it snaps to the grid. And let's make a ground, Shift S a cursor to world origin, and let's select the plane and S to make it bigger. What we can also do to match it better, select your steps, edge select this edge, Shift S, cursor to select it, and select your plane, Shift S, selection to cursor, and then it is perfectly aligned. And you just have to move it on the y-axis, so until here is fine. And you can make it as big as you want, something like this should be good. And you can make it maybe a bit more tiny on this side, so S and X. And let's make this wall here, so let's select everything and E and Z to move it down. Next we can make this pool in the middle, so let's go back to edit mode and select this face. Go to 7 and I for inserting, and you can choose a shape that you like, and we can make it a tiny bit smaller and maybe bigger on the x-axis, something like this. And what we can do next is just E to extrude it down. And let's make this object here, so we can go back and choose this object and Shift S cursor to select it. And let's also move these pillars a bit. So let's move this more on the y-axis until here. Shift and right click to move your cursor to here. Shift S and the cube. And let's scale it again and turn off your proportional editing. And let's place it. S and Shift and Z. And select this face and make it smaller. Select this face, Shift and S cursor to select it. And let's select the circle again and extrude it up. Fill the circle and also fill this one here. Select both edges and let's bevel them. We can go back to our proportional editing and make this a bit higher. And let's extrude this face up, make a loop cut in the middle and scale it a bit down. You can choose whatever shape you like. I think something like this is pretty nice. So X and faces and E and S and E again and S. And fill the circle, a loop cut in the middle, Ctrl R and scale it up until we have a circle-like shape. Let's move it a bit down and let's select all these edges here and Ctrl B to bevel them again. And we can select this upper face here and make it smaller, so insetting. And we need our proportional editing for that, so let's choose it. Go to 1 and scale it a bit up until we have like a pear shape. And as you can see, it is too big, so we have to make it smaller. And S and Shift and Z. And just a bit adjusting here and there until you find something that you like. So this should be enough, and we can make it a bit smaller. And next we can select this face, extrude it again. A loop cut in the middle and scale it a bit up. Just a small sphere. Something like this is fine. And next, let's select this object and Shift S cursor to select it and select the plane. Select this edge here and let's move it a bit. Let's make it smaller on the y-axis. And let's give it some thickness. Solidify. And just move it a bit until it reaches this object here. So this should be good. And we can shade this auto smooth, then it looks much better. And next we can join these two objects, so Ctrl J. And let's move them a bit. And we can make an array modifier again. And let's make it a bit more higher on the x-axis and crank the number up. And let's see how it looks. So it shouldn't look too big or too small, so I think this should be fine. Maybe we can make it a bit tinier and a bit bigger on the y-axis. And we can move this a bit more down. So something like this should be fine. And now we can make these arches here, so let's make them. So let's select these objects here. And we can duplicate it and M, new collection, and name it backup. So we have some backup objects, just in case we make some mistakes, so we can just hide them. Select these objects and Ctrl J to merge them. And shade it auto smooth. And Shift D, and let's move it on the x-axis to the other side. And I think the steps are a little bit too broad, so we can make them a bit smaller on the x-axis. And we can move these objects more in. And let's select these pillars again and move them a bit. And let's select the other one and delete it. And we can choose these ones and this and move it a bit. So around here is fine. And we can select it and duplicate it, move it to the other side. Select these upper ones, so go to edit mode. Or we can select these both edges and cursor to select it. And now it's in the middle. And Shift A, let's add a plane. And R, X 90. And let's scale it up. And make a couple of subdivisions. So subdivide it a couple of times, so maybe 3 or 4 times is enough, and go to 1 and face select, and let's select the face and right click loop tools circle. If you don't have your loop tools yet, you have to go to edit, preferences and search your loop tools. It is an add-on that comes with Blender. And now we can just select these faces here, we don't need them, so we can just select them and X and faces and select these upper edges here, and we can move them a bit down. We can extrude it a bit. And now we have these arches here, so we can make it a bit bigger until it matches. to something like here. We also don't need these faces here, so we can just select these faces here by holding shift and faces, and then we have this arch. And what we can do next is select everything and E to give it some thickness, and let's place it. And you can also choose a height, so this should be good. And here you can see it is sticking out, so we have to delete these faces. So Alt and Z to go to X-ray mode, and let's select these faces and delete them. And now we can select these edges down here and make them a bit down. And Ctrl 2 to give it a subdivision. And what we can do next is select these edges here. Or you can go up here, select sharp edges. And now all these sharp edges are selected. And next we can go to N and Item, and we can make the mean crease all the way up, and then it is sharp, and we can shade it auto smooth. And next we can select these edges here by your X-ray mode, don't forget it, and move this one a bit up, and we can move these a bit more inwards. We can make this maybe a tiny bit smaller, so another arch is fitting in this area here. And we will continue building our model, making a moon for the background, adding plants and water, adding lighting, and lastly some compositing. So you can just click this video here, and I'll see you in the next one.